time. Listen out.
What's up, what's up, what's up, what's up?
That shit is just in reverse. He's really backing that up. Like, she's really just walking backwards. Completely back. Hey, keep it up, honey.
I don't know why I won't let me post this video for you.
Keep it up, honey.
That's crazy. What's up? What's up? I hope y'all are joining me here.
He was furious and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its victim, and its vicinity who were under 2 years old. And 2 years old and under, sorry. In accordance to the time he had learned from the Magi.
What's good, everybody?
Then what was said? Sorry, I can't talk.
The American Society of Magical Negroes, let's talk about it. No, you're not hearing things. That's what I said. This is a movie coming out March 2024. The trailer just dropped today. And the reactions...
I'll watch this, but I have no real interest in watching this.
I wouldn't say it's all over the place. It's all kind of going in one direction. People are not happy. A lot of people of my shade within this spectrum of brown are not happy. And I'm not surprised, honestly, but that right there deserves further digging into, and it's a conversation for another time. I want to talk about something else. Before everyone completely flips their lid, I want to help add a little bit of context, so we all know where this is coming from. So this is a movie right here coming out.
This is crazy.
I don't know if you can...
They won't let me post that video.
As you can see, we're live right now, and that's because we're continuing with our...
I don't know why I won't let me post this video. It's crazy. What's up, what's up, what's up? Come and join us.
Why is it at these deliverance ministries, all the casting out of demons look just like people receiving the Holy Spirit? Don't believe me? Let's look at some clips. Tell me, with no sound, and me making sure that there's no words on the screen, do you know what's happening?
Come on in the room.
I don't know, Bianca. I wouldn't trust that.
Wow. I'm gonna let me post the video. It's crazy.
The way that they animated Yuji in this episode as the fight went on, he looked more and more like...
What's up, Agapios? We got Agapios in the building. I'm trying to post this TikTok and it won't let me post the TikTok. I'm shocked. I am thoroughly shocked right now. This is crazy. This is crazy. I'm tempted to just record another TikTok, but I don't know. What y'all think? Should I just post another TikTok? What you think? Agapio, should I just record another TikTok? The stream's current bitrate is 19. Oh, she's eating that singing though.
People are very up.
Don't you know I'm no good for you? I've learned to lose. You can't afford to. Tore my shirt to
My man said, yeah, why not? Alright. I'm gonna record a TikTok real quick. It'll be right behind you. You'll probably hear me. I'll be right back. Stay right there. Stay right there, Agapios.
How can we get one? Well, so let's talk about the movie American. Why would you tell a pastor to watch Attack on Titan as his first anime? Look at him. Just dancing. He doesn't even know. What are you gonna tell him? Berserk next? Boku no Pico? I'm glad he already knows Jesus. Watch Attack on Titan as his first anime. His first anime. Look at him. Why would you tell a pastor? Why would you tell a pastor to watch Attack on Titan as his first anime? Look at him.
Well, why wouldn't you tell him to watch Attack on Titan to be his first anime? Attack on Titan basically reflects the Bible. Okay, hold on. Why wouldn't you want him to watch Attack on Titan? Attack on Titan reflects what takes place in Genesis chapter 6, in that Bible that you held up later on in that video. I don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of narratives that you get in your favorite anime, including Berserk, aren't told without some correlation back to the Bible. The giants taking over and causing chaos to the point of humanity almost becoming extinct is the whole reason why God caused the flood in the first place with Noah. And then you want to bring up Berserk, you want to bring up One Piece. One Piece is about Luffy, who operates like Jesus did in coming into the world to ensure that the whole world can have freedom, where Jesus himself was already free through his relationship with his Father. Now, I know Berserk is a very complicated series to look at, and even especially recommending that to a Christian, but what are they commonly fighting against throughout the majority of the series? Evil spirits and demons. That is what Christians contend against on a daily basis. Evil spirits, demons, those are the enemies that God calls us to fight against. He says we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, and rulers of this age, which is technically what Guts does throughout most of the series of Berserk. You trying to tell the audience not to recommend such anime to the pastor. Well, I'm going to recommend the Bible to you. Maybe you can see these correlations, and maybe then it'll make sense why he's dancing the way that he is. Just saying. Rookie!
In Genesis chapter 6, you know, in that Bible that you held up later on in that video.
I'm back.
I don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of narratives that you...
I'm about to post a video on YouTube and then we'll get this video started, I promise.
Why would you tell a pastor to watch Attack on Titan as his first anime? Look at him.
Why wouldn't you want him to watch Attack on Titan? Attack on Titan reflects what takes place in Genesis chapter 6, you know, in that Bible that you held up later on in that...
What's your opinion on Spy Family? Rookie, Spy Family is absolutely amazing. I really love the dynamic of that series that it gives to taking it like these random people coming together to be a family, and how where they thought being together for the job was more important, they're actually together for each other, but they operate as a family unit. I think it's beautiful. I think it's beautiful.
It reflects what takes place in Genesis chapter 6, you know, in that Bible that you held.
There we go. There we go. Almost done, people. That way, this way I can go live on TikTok and then we'll get the video started. I love it. It's one of my favorites. Oh, for sure. I love the old dude. The old dude at the school. When he's like, elegance! I love that old guy, man. He is too funny. He's out there screaming elegance all the time. Dude's hilarious, bro. Okay, and post.
People are very upset with this group.
My sister called me.
Because of his wedding vows.
I promise to smack him every chance I get.
So in the video, the groom's only...
Come on. Where? You ever order... Do you have safe?
SNU is giving away money. You can enter.
Gosh, I hate my job. They keep sending me pictures for work stuff.
For a chance to win, right?
People are very upset with this groom because...
Who lives off the grid?
I know y'all can hear my phone. I am sorry, guys.
I'm
I'm just hoping this video posts.
So you're telling me that I have to come up with a solution all by myself?
The fight of the century is happening tonight. And no, not this one. It is clearly the late and great former president.
Come on, please load. I know YouTube. Y'all ain't got a bash on me.
People have been asking me if I would ever review someone else's writing. And the answer is complicated. I write my own manga that's being turned into an anime and has been read by millions of people.
Boom. It's loaded. We officially can get this started now. See, now I can go live. There we go. Okay, we're good, people. We're good. We're good. How's everybody doing tonight? I hope Agapios is still here. Rookie, I hope you're still here. Everybody joining us here online. If you're here on TikTok, man, I hope y'all get to see this. I hope y'all get to see this for real. Come join us on YouTube if you're joining us here on TikTok. Come on in the room. I think this video right here is going to be very interesting because we're getting this opportunity to look at Jordan Peterson's biblical series where he hold on, I'm trying to find my place here, where he gives a psychological perspective of the gospel. And I think this is actually a very interesting topic to look at the gospel from this point of view. And I definitely want to know what you guys think. Yeah, that's my people. I definitely want to know what you guys think about Jordan Peterson and what he says. Sure, if you love Jordan Peterson now, that is absolutely all right. I think that's really, really cool. But at the same time, what would be more interesting is to see what you actually think of what he's saying as we are checking out this literal video. Let's see what he was thinking back then when he made the original one. And as this experience is progressing, we'll get the opportunity to look at his Exodus series and what other biblical content he will be putting out here in the future. Jordan Peterson is a psychologist out of Canada who actually blew up from his contention with what's known as Bill C-16, which in simple terms was a bill that was being passed that if you were to say anything or do anything against people of a certain community, if you will, or particularly of the Transformers, as Ruslan would say, then you could be fined, you could be put in prison, but basically you would suffer penalty if you said anything in disagreement with them or against them, if they found it offensive. It wasn't simply about there being specific things you'd have to say and do. It was also about them simply being offended. If them of their own volition felt as though you were a threat to their life, then they could fine you, they could imprison you, and a whole bunch of other things. So this put Jordan Peterson on the map, nationally as well as worldwide, where people were wondering why he was contending so hard against this. And so that's one of the big things. Only in select states does that actually apply here in America, but it's not in all 50, and it's very few states. I think New York holds to this standard, and a couple of other big cities, but otherwise it hasn't been made worldwide. One of the things that I learned when I was working at Cytel was that inside a company that I was working for here, that when we have to open up people's insurance policies, if I noticed, let's say, that they had transformed, and I didn't acknowledge them by the correct terminology by which they wanted to go, and then they reported me to my leadership, I would lose my job. They could come for my job just based off of that and that alone, accident or not. I'd just have to make the mistake, and I could lose my job. and I think several other jobs already enforce this as well. So there are some policies based on company that are already enforcing these same things. So yes, it's a real problem. But Jordan Peterson tackled it. The other thing though with Jordan Peterson is that Jordan Peterson is a man that has demonstrated a huge curiosity, interest, and attraction to the gospel of the Bible and teaching those things. As of currently, my understanding is that he wants a relationship with God, I believe, but what he has been convinced of when it comes to Jesus are not things that he has been expressing or conveying to the people. So it is unclear to the audience of the world whether or not he actually believes in Jesus Christ as his Lord and Savior and has committed his life to him. His wife has professed this faith. His daughter has professed this faith. I don't know if his son has, but he hasn't. However, like I said, he has a lot to say in regards to the Word. He thinks that it's extremely valuable to human life. And so that's why we're looking at this. Although a lot of us can simply read the Word and understand it in context, and we can get supernatural revelation from the Word of what God is communicating. The thing is, where we're getting a psychological observation of this, in one sense, I do believe that there is fruit that we can gain from this, but there's also learning opportunities where he may make certain claims that it is important for us to be able to identify the differences in these claims, whether it's like just a secular perspective on the Word versus it actually being the truth of the Word. And so I think it's important that when we look at this, we can identify that and call it out as well. In all honesty, one of the biggest blessings out of this would be if Jordan Peterson himself sees this live, my life would be transformed. I would love it if Jordan Peterson saw this. I would love it if I could ever have a conversation with him. I would love it if we got to look at comic books from the lens that he looks at the gospel. I think comic books hold a similar influence. And so that's just one of those things I definitely love to look at. Am I crazy for putting barbecue sauce on mashed potatoes? No, you honestly aren't. In my head, I think that would taste good. Shout out to Kitsune for joining us here on TikTok. I want to let my TikTok people know you're more than welcome to follow here, but we will be streaming this on YouTube. So if you want to be able to actually, see what's being said, reviewed, etc., come join us here on YouTube. That way y'all can see the topic at hand. I would definitely love it if y'all would join us here. That way y'all can see everything that we're talking about. But you're more than welcome to stick around from where you are. That's perfectly fine as well. I'm trying to find something. Hold on. I'm trying to find my earphones. Because I should be fine. But this would probably be easier if I had earphones. Oh, God. It would probably be easier if I had earphones. That way this isn't blaring into the microphone. I don't want to cause too much distortion. I think that's what I'm about to do. Hey, Kitsune, we're looking at Jordan Peterson's biblical series on Genesis on YouTube. We're going to be doing a live reaction to his video on YouTube. So if you want, come join us here on YouTube. If not, you're more than welcome to stay here. You might hear it in the background. But otherwise, we'll be playing through, and depending on what's said, I'll pause to see what y'all are saying. I'll pause to make some responses to what he's saying. Let's go. Let's go, let's go, let's go. As I'm pulling this up, I want you guys to know that the first part, no, you're okay. You're okay, Kitsune. A-okay. You're A-okay. I don't think she would be mad. What did Chark say? He said also the fact that in some places you can get arrested for not... Yeah, that's absolutely true. Oh, yeah. Okay, so one of the first things I'll tell you guys is the video that we're looking at is going to be starting 25 minutes in. Mainly because I kind of want to get at the point where he's actually getting into the Bible rather than him breaking down why he gets into what got him into this in the first place and the other relations that he'll be making. One of the relations that he points out in the first 25 minutes of the video that I would suggest you go back and watch that on your personal time because then it'll make even more sense what we're talking about today. He makes references to a man by the name of Friedrich Nietzsche, who's a very famous psychologist and philosophical thinker of the past, who's already passed away. But he wrote a book called God is Dead. Now, the thing about the book that he wrote is that most people understand that to mean that humanity has gotten to this place where they're able to function, and thrive and succeed without God. And so hence why he's wrote this book, God is Dead. And so what Jordan Peterson is actually identifying is he's identifying two things in regards to Friedrich Nietzsche's book. One of those things being is he was more so saying this to the detriment of humanity, not to the glorification of humanity. Because one of the quotes in the book is, God is dead and you have killed him. And there's not enough water to wash away the blood. And so that's one of Friedrich Nietzsche's quotes, a man who's believed to not have believed in God. But what he is pointing out, when humanity starts to get away from God, things actually start to fall apart, not necessarily work for humanity's good. The other thing that he's pointing out also is how the downside to the Christian walk, the downside that Christians have fallen into, is when we've become more ritualistic rather than faithful or conscious of what it is that we're doing. And so that leads to us, I guess you could say, operating recklessly. We get the fall of Israel results. We get stuff like that taking place rather than a thriving community of Christians and believers and churchgoers and people that are transforming America, transforming other parts of the world. But that's because of that there's this fall. When we get ourselves falling more and more away from God as believers, that leads to our religious movement's detriment. And so those are a lot of what he's been saying in that first 25 minutes, along with so much other stuff. So we're going to start 25 minutes in. I'm going to have this playing at a higher speed with hopes that in playing it in a higher speed, TikTok will not take this video down. That is my hope. All right, we're going to start right around this 24-minute mark. I'm going to turn it up for me to hear and for probably you guys to hear. Maybe some people shouldn't believe in their dreams. In part, he says something along similar to that or along those lines in the first part of this video, talking about people in their dreams. But one of the things that he's pointing out is because of the status of reality, that might make us deny pursuing our dreams more, which is to our hindrance. And what he's getting into with that is he's talking about being able to tap into creativity, imagination, because one of the big things he also harps on. I'm not trying to continuously try to explain that whole 25 minutes. That would lead to us better off watching it. But what gives us some of the greatest artworks and paintings and sculptures and buildings that we've seen throughout history is people tapping into that dream-like aspect of themselves, getting into their imagination, getting into spirituality, drawing closer to the true and living God or their gods. That's where we get all of these things from history, is because people were having this relationship with these great things. And although those structures didn't necessarily advance, society in a specific way, they did it abstractly. Did they motivate and move humanity forward? So those dreams are actually necessary for us, especially if we're claiming to be believers. All right, guys, let's go. I got to turn it up on here too, because I want to make sure the people online can hear it good. Let me know if it's too low. Agapios and Rookie, let me know if it's too low for you guys to hear. And again, if you're on TikTok, switch on over to YouTube. That way you can hear it.
And captured in some sense in these ancient stories, which I believe were part of especially the oldest stories in Genesis, which are the stories we're going to start with, that some of the archaic nature of the human being is encapsulated in those stories, and it's very, very instructive as far as I can tell. I'll give you just a quick example. There's an idea of sacrificing in the Old Testament. And it's pretty barbaric, the story of Abraham and Isaac is a good example of that, because Abraham is called on to actually sacrifice his own son, which doesn't really seem like something that a reasonable God would ask you to do, right? The God in the Old Testament is frequently cruel and arbitrary demanding and paradoxical, and which is one of the things that really gives the book life, because it wasn't edited by a committee, a committee that was concerned with not offending anyone, that's for sure. So Jung believed that the dream was the birthplace of thought, and
Let me pause here for a second. Another person he's going to start mentioning is a man by Carl Jung. He'll do a better job of speaking to these philosophical thinkers and psychologists, mainly because I haven't read any of their work to adequately speak to them. Hence why I'll mainly be responding to Jordan Peterson and what he says about them, rather than hoping to articulate these thinkers well on my own. And I will apologize in advance if I misrepresent them in their ideas, being that I haven't read their work. But notice the first thing that he points out. Is that about sacrifice. One of the things that he is getting into when the Bible is speaking on sacrifice is how the quote-unquote tyrannical nature of God, where God is quick to wipe a certain group out, or God has all of these laws, or God has all of these standards, and he's always getting on to people for this and for that. But that is actually to the benefit of the people, not to their detriment. So here's a great example, and I'll be a nerd about it, right? A great example of why we need the standards that God gives is where our capabilities as human beings is vast. And a lot of times it's very beautiful and magnificent. But in other times it can be chaotic and destructive. And we need a lens or barriers, like when bowling, up to be able to guide that energy, to guide that power, to guide that strength, so that it's not sporadic and chaotic. And that's actually a lot of what God brings to the table when he is so forceful and when he is so judgmental, right? He brings order to such a chaotic world. Not only that, another example that I think my fellow nerds would really enjoy is that, think of Cyclops, right? Cyclops from the X-Men, when he takes his glasses off and if he just stood there and opened his eyes, it would be nothing but energy beams blasting all over the place and destroying anything that is in the vicinity that he is looking at, right? But then he wears his glasses, and then he wears his visors so that he can actually control the energy that is being blasted. Even if he uses his visors, he has this knob on the side to control the force of the beam, so it's not just this widespread chaotic energy blast. And so that same explanation could be said of what God does on our behalf. A lot of what he does doesn't seem to make sense, but when you really start to study and get an understanding of why he says what he says, why he does what he does, then you understand that it is for your betterment and control, in a sense of discipline, rather than for your destruction.
I've been extending that idea because one of the things I wondered about deeply was, you have a dream and then someone interprets it. You can argue about whether or not an interpretation is valid, just like you can argue about whether your interpretation of a novel or movie is valid, right? It's a very difficult thing to determine with any degree of accuracy, which counts in part for the postmodern critique. But my observation has been that people will present a dream, and sometimes we can extract out real useful information from it that the person didn't appear to know. And they get a flash of insight, and to me that's a marker that we've stumbled on something that unites part of that person that wasn't united before. It pulls things together, which is often what a good story will do, or sometimes a good theory. Things snap together for you, and there's a little light goes on, and that's one of the markers that I've used for accuracy in dreams. And I know in my own family, when I was first married, I'd have fights with my wife, arguments about this and that, and I'm fairly hot-headed, and so I'd get all...
Looks like the TikTok froze. Oh no, TikTok. Why would you do that to me? I don't know why TikTok's been lagging lately. That's crazy. Sorry guys, just fixing the TikTok. We'll get back to it. The interpretation argument always used on me. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by people are always using the interpretation argument against you? Though this is by the way, Kisane, we're back. I hope you're still here. But that's what's really interesting about what he's saying here, is he's speaking to, with the depth of complexity that the Bible brings, the value that actually comes out of that, hence why we have like our pastors and our teachers and preachers and ministers, is that they're bringing this clarity that we otherwise were not aware of in such a very deep and complicated book like the Bible. And so that's actually a very good point, because that's another thing that we get with stories. That's another thing that we get when it comes to dreams. I like that recognition of dreams. We have dreams that take us on unusual, I'm about to repeat myself because I was reading Wendy's comment. Unorthodox incidents that take place, right? Here's a good example of that. And I'm so glad you're still here, Kitsune. Here's a good example of that. When I was a kid, I had a dream that my sister and I were on a plane, but I was with this girl who was in a green jacket. She looked like one of my childhood friends, but it's as if me and her were married. Now, me and my sister consciously never really been on a plane, but in the dream, me and her are on a plane. And then she sneaks to the back of this minivan that's in the plane, and she is like hanging from the back seat, like going into the trunk space. She's hanging off the back seat of that minivan to fall into a pit of fire. And and I'm having to reach down and try to hold on to my sister who's slipping out of my fingers, to pull her up out of that fire. And it's just like, wait, why am I having a dream about my sister about to burn? This makes no sense. Why am I having a dream about me being in a plane? Why am I having a dream about being with this girl? I was never attracted to her in that way. Keep in mind, I'm 5 years old having this dream. I'm aware of all of this. I'm not attracted to this girl. I don't want to be with her like that. And so when you think about those realities or those different things that are taking place in the dream, which I already understand what that meant, and I thank the Lord that my sister is still alive today, to be able to come together and to comprehend the complexity of what we see in dreams, the complexity of what we see in stories, TV shows, the Bible itself. It's important for us to be able to break those things down.
Puffed up and, agitated about whatever we were arguing about, and she'd go to sleep, which was really annoying. So annoying. Because I couldn't sleep, right? I was like chewing off my fingernails, and she'd be like sleeping peacefully beside me. It's like maddening. But often she'd have a dream, and then the next morning she'd discuss it with me, and then we could unravel what was at the bottom of our argument. And that was unbelievably useful, even though it was extraordinarily aggravating. So I was convinced by Jung. It looked to me like his ideas about the relationship between dreams and mythology and drama and literature made sense to me, and the relationship between that and art. I know this native carver. He's a Kwakwaka'wakw guy. He's carved a bunch of wooden sculptures, totem poles, and masks that I have in my house. And he's a very interesting person, not particularly literate, and really still steeped in this ancient 13,000-year-old tradition. He's an original language speaker. And the fact that he isn't literate has sort of left him with the mind of someone who's pre-literate. And pre-literate people aren't stupid. They're just not literate. So their brains are organized differently in many ways. And I've asked him about his intuition for his carvings. And he's told me that he dreams, like you've seen the Haida masks, you know what they look like. Well, his people are closely related to the Haida, so it's the same kind of style. He said he dreams in those animals and can remember his dreams. And he also talks to his grandparents who taught him how to carve in his dreams. Quite often, if he runs into a problem with carving, his grandparents will come and he'll talk to them. But he sees the creatures that he's going to carve living in an animated sense in his imagination. And, I mean, it's not that difficult. First of all, I have no reason to disbelieve him. He's a very, very straightforward person, and he doesn't have the motivation or the guile, I would say, in some sense, to invent a story like that. There's just no reason he would possibly do it. I don't think he's told that many people about it. He thinks it's kind of crazy, He said when he was a kid, he thought he was insane because he'd had those dreams all the time about these creatures and so forth. And so it wasn't something he was trumpeting. But I found it fascinating because I can see in him part of the manifestation of this unbroken tradition. We have no idea how traditions like that are really passed along for thousands and thousands of years, right? Part of it's oral and memory, part of it's acted out and dramatized, and then part of it's going to be imaginative. And people who aren't literate, they store information quite differently than we do. We don't remember anything. It's all written down in books, right? But if you're from an oral culture, especially if you're trained in that way, you have all of that information at hand, both so you can speak it, you can tell the stories, and you really know them. And, modern
Now, the only reason I'm pausing here is to kind of point out this next point that he's making. You know, he's looking at this native gentleman who he used to know, who produced magnificent carvings and artwork. But what these carvings and artwork manifest from, one, from his own dreams and from his own visions, two, from historical traditions that are being reflected in his current art style that stem from what I would say are shamanistic, ritualistic practices of his people from way back in the day. And so, being that they had such deep ritualistic practices like that, the abilities shown themselves in these instances, while although this man may not be continuing to practice those rituals, the nature of those rituals are reflected in his ability to see in his carvings. Now, what I would say and this might be a bit much to say towards this man, there's on some level spiritual bondage reflected in this, because he knows not where this comes from. First and foremost, this comes from God. The gift to have these visions and to see certain things like that is a gift from God. The bad part is, the only reason I would say that it has demonic root or ungodly root is because he's not using these gifts to the glory of God, and he's not known to be a man that believes in God. But even more so, like I said, it's rooted from that history and his tribal relationship, not because of a relationship with God. And so that's one of those things that actually makes that concerning. And I would say that man needs prayer. But this video is extremely old. There's no telling if that man is still walking that same life. Agapio says, hey, Kentario, what's your take on people speaking to their ancestors in their dreams? Do you think it's demonic? I absolutely do think it's demonic. I do think it's demonic. And here's why I say it's demonic. I'm not saying the individual speaking to their ancestors is a demon. What I am saying is those quote-unquote family members are not family members. They're evil spirits and or demons reflecting the nature of those family members to open you up spiritually so that they can come in and afflict you in some way, shape, or form. Get dominion in your body. Get dominion in your family. Get dominion in your community. Make you be an instrument against other people. So when people are saying they're practicing these ancestral type of conversations, that's something I actually pray against for them. Just like Jesus rebuked Peter when Peter went to go say Jesus would not surely die, Jesus rebuked him. And it wasn't about Jesus being mean to Peter. This was about Jesus denying the spirit that wanted to, like he said to Cain, is knocking at the door of your heart. Sin is knocking at the door of your heart. This spirit's looking to show himself to have power in you. He's denying that. He's denying that. And amen, Agapio, so I'm glad. Wendy says, spirit guides, another lie, mimic, but not true. That is absolutely correct. These are lies and these are mimicry. What's up, Brandon Williams? It's good to see you, man. We are watching Jordan Peterson's Bible series where he's reviewing the book of Genesis. And we're live right now watching it. I hope you come over here and join us if you want to watch Jordan Peterson's video while we're watching it. But if you want to stay on here, that's perfectly fine as well. Kitsune says, she says, I've seen a woman on YT claiming she could see and speak to spirits and tell what's a demon and what's not. I would have to say I do still disagree with it. Well, I will say it like this. Depending on whether or not she's a believer in God, there are some instances in which believers have these experiences of interacting with people who have passed away. I'm not saying that, so depending on the context of that, because you gotta, and when people say stuff like that, you gotta look at in every detail of what they're saying. Because God's not going to, I would argue that God's not going to put us as human beings in a spiritual position to be triggered or to be traumatized or to long for a person that's gone when God has brought them home. I don't think that's a part of God's ways and God's practices. But here's the thing that would contribute with that. And this is highly possible, Kitsune. I don't think you're wrong for believing that. And it's highly possible in this regard, right? This is what's powerful about this when we're talking about this. the transfiguration on the mountain, I'm asking this question, and you can answer this question, but I'm also going to go ahead and answer my own question. On the transfiguration on the mountain, when Jesus went up with Peter, James, and John, who else did they see with Jesus on that mountain? They saw Elijah, and they saw Moses. Now, the thing about that is these two gentlemen in particular had supernatural passings. Elijah, not even seeing death, went up into the heavens on a flaming chariot. Moses was said to have lost his life. You are correct, Joshua. Good call. You are correct. Moses said to have lost his life. His body was dealt with by God. Thus, no one knows where the body of Moses is. So these two men had supernatural passings, if you will. Now, these two people who are supposed to be moved on, no longer in the living world, were seen by Peter, James, and John. And so it's like, wait, so we can't see people who are dead and gone. In some sense, that might be possible. But is God putting you in this position to get console from constantly being able to see and speak to your dead loved ones or ancestors? Absolutely not. So, because that is unhealthy for you. Even when you look at that instance with Peter, James, and John, Peter's immediate reaction to seeing those three there was, well, let's build a temple for Moses, Elijah, and for Jesus. And it's just like, bro, you missed the point. If anything, the only person you should want to build a temple for is Jesus. But you want to idolize these two men who are not alive, who are technically not alive, but otherwise, you know what I'm saying? You want to build temples for them, you're losing sight of who Jesus is. And so that's the issue that we come across with people talking to dead loved ones, is you start to lose sight of God. Now, Ruki says, my dead grandfather showed himself to my aunt in the hospital and told her to get back to church, and the lady in the room with her saw him too. Now, we see that there's a motivation to get one's life back right with Christ. I'm not saying that it's true, what you're telling me. I can't 100% advocate for it being true. I can give you 40%. That being said, it was to drive her back into a relationship with God. It wasn't so that she could miss her dead grandfather. See, there's a difference there. Keaton says, I believe this woman is able to see something, but I don't think it's human. I agree with you, Keaton, 100%. Let's get back to it.
Modern people don't really know what that's like anymore. Doubt if there's more than maybe two of you in the audience that could spout from memory like a 30-line poem. You know, and poetry was written so that people could do that. That's why we have that form, is so that people could remember it and have it with them. And we don't do any of that anymore. Anyways, back to Jung. Jung was a great believer in the dream, and I noted that dreams will tell you things that you don't know. And then I thought, well, how the hell can that be? How in the world can something you think up tell you something you don't know? How does that make any sense? First of all, why don't you understand it? Why does it have to come forth in the form of the dream? It's like there's something going on inside you that you don't control, right? The dream happens to you just like life happens to you. I mean, there is the odd lucid dreamer who can, apply a certain amount of conscious control, but most of the time you're laying there asleep and this crazy complicated world manifests itself inside you, and you don't know how, you can't do it when you're awake, and you don't know what it means. It's like, what the hell is going on? And that's one of the things that's so damn frightening about the psychoanalysts, because you get this both from Freud and Jung, you really start to understand that there are things inside you that are happening that control you instead of the other way around. There's a bit of reciprocal control, but there's manifestations of spirits, so to speak, inside you that determine the manner in which you walk through life. And you don't control it. And what does? Is it random? There are people who have claimed that dreams are merely the consequence of random neuronal firing, which is a theory I think is absolutely absurd, because there's nothing random about dreams. They're very, very structured and very, very complex. And they're not like snow on a television screen or static on a radio. Like, those things are complicated. And then also I've seen so often that people have very coherent dreams that have a perfect narrative structure. Now, they're fully developed in some sense. And so that theory just doesn't go anywhere with me. I just can't see that as useful at all. And so I'm more likely to take the phenomena seriously and say, well, there's something to dreams. Well, you dream of the future and then you try to make it into a reality. That seems to be an important thing. Or maybe you dream up a nightmare and try to make that into a reality, because people do that too if they're hell-bent on revenge, for example, and full of hatred and resentment. I mean, that manifests itself in terrible fantasies. Those are dreams, and then people go act them out. These things are powerful, you know, and whole nations can get caught up in collective dreams. That's what happened to the Nazis. That's what happened to Nazi Germany in the 1930s. It was an absolutely remarkable, amazing, horrific, destructive spectacle. And the same thing happened in the Soviet Union. The same thing happened in China. It's like, we have to take these things seriously, you know, and try to understand what's going on. So Jung believed that the dream could contain more information than was yet articulated. You think artists do the same thing, you know, like people go to museums and they look at paintings.
Kitsune says the only thing random about dreams is how likely and unlikely you are to remember them. That's actually that's pretty true. There's a lot of subconscious happenings taking place in the dreamscape, and that's one of the things that is interesting about what he's saying. Is it is unusual when you think of it from the dream aspect. But here's the thing I think that is frustrating about this, and I'm going to use this as an example. The reason why the dreams are more frustrating is because you have no control over what's taking place in the dream. You have minimal control. There are times where you have control, but most times you have no control. Even the actions that you commit in the dreams, 9 times out of 10 aren't actions that you would immediately just take in the current reality, right? And so that's one of the things that's actually baffling, is that there are things that you're willing to do in dreams that you won't do in reality. There's a lack of control that you have. You have no self-control in your dreams. And in some sense, if you're really paying attention to you, it'll reveal the most carnal of you. I just thought of this. Release dreams are most frustrating. What are release dreams? Real dreams? Release dreams. That's weird. But, yeah, just clarify that for me, Wendy. I'll read it again. But the contrast to the out-of-control nature of dreams is that of the human body, right? Because actually, the human body does so much subconsciously that you don't think it's doing, you're not aware it's doing. What do you do to make your heart beat? What do you do besides actually eat to make your body process the food that enters it? What are you doing that is actually channeling the inner strength for your legs to hold up the rest of your body? What are you doing that's making your spine stay straight up, so balanced? What are you doing intently, consciously, really, right? Kitsune says, I've done some pretty awful things in my dreams. Trust me, me too. Me too. You know how the Bible says, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks? I think that also goes into out of the abundance of your dreams, is your heart revealed as well. In the abundance of your dreams is your heart revealed as well. I think that is so true. The person you are in your dreams might be the real you. The person you are in your dreams might be the real you. Kitsune, I think she clarified. She said, subconscious fears in dreams. I used to study dreams a lot in my early years. Amen. No. That's such a good one. My arachnophobia comes from me having dreams. My fear of, I'm going to give y'all a spoiler for Kentario right quick. My fear of Elmo comes from my dreams. I said that. Because I had a nightmare that Elmo wanted to take my life, I have never trusted Elmo since. Me and Elmo are not friends. If y'all send me anything involving Elmo, I mean this jokingly, I will block you. I will block you. And I will never talk to you again. I'm just kidding. But please don't send me anything with Elmo. Wendy says, example, I dream my cats escape all the time. Aww. And now they escape and never come back? Because that definitely would suck. My dream self is violent, to say the least. I'll be honest. Your artwork told me that. When I saw your design, which was still amazing, by the way, that told me that there's a violence in you, young lady. Very Sith-like nature. All right, let's get back to it.
Renaissance paintings or modern
We're going to
paintings.
stop
I
at
don't
about
exactly know why
9:30
they're
because
there.
I got to go get
You
my
know, I was
daughter.
in this
But we're
room
going to
in
definitely
New
be
York.
doing this a lot.
I don't remember which
If I'm
museum.
off on Monday, we'll
It was
do
a
this
room
again.
full of Renaissance art, you know, great painters, the greatest painters, and thought maybe that room was worth $1 billion or something outrageous because there was like 20 paintings in there, you know, so priceless. And the first thing is, well, why are those paintings worth so much? And why is there a museum in the biggest city in the world devoted to them? And why do people from all over the world come and look at them? What the hell are those people doing? One of them was of the Assumption of Mary, you know, beautifully painted, absolutely glowing work of art, and there's like 20 people standing in front of it looking at it and think, what are those people up to? You know, they don't know. Why did they make a pilgrimage to New York to come and look at that painting? It's not like they know. Why is it worth so much? I mean, I know there's a status element to it too, but that begs the question. Why do those items become such high status items? What is it about them that's so absolutely remarkable? Well, we're strange creatures. So I was trying to figure out, well, where did the information that's in the dream come from? Because it has to come from somewhere, and you could think about it as a revelation, you know, because it's like it springs out of the void and it's new knowledge and it's a revelation. You didn't produce it, it just appears. But that's, see, one of the things I want to do with this series is like I'm scientifically minded and I'm quite a rational person, and I like to have an explanation for things that's rational and empirical before I look for any other kind of explanation. And I don't want to say that everything that's associated with divinity can be reduced in some manner to biology or to an evolutionary history or anything like that, but insofar as...
Now, I want to pause. I'm pausing here because I think this is extremely important. First and foremost, Kitsune, I know you don't like it, but I think what would be good for you, you need to know how to channel it. Where should I direct this energy? I don't know if you guys know this, but supposedly Stephen King, the reason why he started writing such horrible and scary books was because it was evident to his parents early on of sociopathic behavior. And so what they did was they guided their son to start writing books instead. Hence where we get it and several other, scary, fearful, but amazing writing from Stephen King, because he took that sociopathic attitude, wanting to just unalive things, to writing. And so it's about how you channel that energy, channel those feelings. Even more so, pray about those feelings and seek God as to how to deal with that anger. But notice how he's talking about how, getting a revelation and tapping into the supernatural and the spiritual. One of the things he's pointing out is, well, I look at things from a scientific lens. I look at things from a rational lens, an empirical lens, before I go to looking at anything else. I don't think he means it in this way, but one of the things to point out from that claim is that that's how Christians ought to look at the gospel. That's how Christians are supposed to look at the gospel. We're not simply supposed to read a verse and get some super revelation and then teach everything that we can in 2 hours time with that one interpretation of the verse, because we just, I saw this out of this and came to this conclusion, and we tell this whole narrative. No, you got to understand the chapter before, the chapter of it, and the chapter after, and maybe the whole book, to be able to articulate scripture in context. You have to have that base of comprehension before you try to tap into anything supernatural, similar to what Jordan Peterson is saying here. Every Christian is supposed to read the word through that lens. I need to comprehend what's actually happening before I try to assume what I think God is trying to tell me out of what's happening. And that's what's really fruitful about this. And that's one thing I would say to anyone who's overtly scientifically minded. Don't think that just because we're Christians that we're ignoring reality or ignoring rational thought or clear thinking or what the data shows, etc. We consider all of that when it comes to, we're supposed to consider all that when it comes to comprehending the Lord.
As it's possible to do that reduction, I'm going to do that. And I'm going to leave the other phenomena floating in the air because they can't be pinned down. And in that category, I would put the category of mystical or religious experience, which we don't understand at all. So artists observe one another. They observe people and they represent what they see, and they transmit the message of what they see to us, and they teach us to see. And we don't necessarily know what it is that we're learning from them. But we're learning something, or at least we're acting like we're learning something. We go to movies, we watch stories, we immerse ourselves in fiction constantly. That's an artistic production. And for many people, the world of the arts is a living world, and that's particularly true if you're a creative person. And it's the creative, artistic people that do move the knowledge of humanity forward. And they do that with their artistic productions first. They're on the edge, and the dancers do that, and the poets do that, and the visual artists do that, and the musicians do that, and we're not sure what they're doing. Like, we're not sure what musicians are doing. What the hell are they doing? Why do you like music? It gives you a deep intimation of the significance of things. And no one questions it. You go to a concert, you're thrilled. It's a quasi-religious experience, particularly if the people really get themselves together and get the crowd moving. There's something incredibly intense about it. It makes no sense whatsoever. It's not an easy thing to understand. Music is deeply patterned, and patterned in layers, and I think that has something to do with it, because reality is patterned and deeply patterned in layers, and so I think music is representing reality in some fundamental way, and that we get into the sway of that and sort of participate in being, and that's part of what makes it such an uplifting experience. But we don't really know that's what we're doing. We just go do it, and it's nourishing for people, right? I mean, young people in particular, lots of them live for music. It's where they derive all their meaning, their cultural identity. Everything that's nourishing comes from their affiliation with their music, and is part of their cultural identity. So that's an amazing thing. The question still remains, where does the information in dreams come from? And I think where it comes from is that we watch the patterns that everyone acts out. We've watched that forever, and we've got some representations of those patterns. That's part of our cultural history. That's what's embedded in stories, in fictional accounts of the story between good and evil, the bad guy and the good guy, and the romance. These are canonical patterns of being for people, and they deeply affect us because they represent what it is that we will act out in the world. And then we flesh that out with the individual information we have about ourselves and other people. And so it's like there's waves of behavioral patterns that manifest themselves in the crowd across time. The great dramas are played on the crowd across time. And the artists watch that, and they get intimations of what that is, and they write it down and they tell us, and then we're a little clearer about what we're up to. Like a great dramatist like Shakespeare, let's say, we know that what he wrote is fiction, and then we say, well, fiction isn't true. But then you think, well, wait a minute, maybe it's true like numbers are true. Numbers are an abstraction from the underlying reality, but no one in their right mind would really think numbers aren't true. You can even make a case that the numbers are more real than the things that they represent, right? Because the abstraction is so insanely powerful. Once you have mathematics, you're just deadly. You can move the world with mathematics. And so it's not obvious that the abstraction is less real than the more concrete reality. And you take a work of fiction like...
That's a good line. The abstraction is no less real than the actual reality. Now, I'm going to come back to that because Corslet asks a question. He says, why do you hate fairy tale if you have a shelf full of the manga? Here's the thing about the manga, right? The manga is attractive. I can admit that. I can admit that the manga is attractive. The fights get you in it. The thing is, it's almost like drinking an energy drink. But it's like chewing rainbow striped gum. Reading fairy tales like rainbow striped gum. You know that when that first bite, when that fruit hit, that fruit is amazing. But how fast that fruit's gone, the disappointment almost overlaps the quality of the first bite. That's the thing with fairy tale. Fairy tale is rainbow striped gum. Them fights be getting you, and they be getting started, and then they just fight's over, next fight, and I'm just like, I didn't even get to enjoy the fight. The emotional moments. Oh, I'm so emotional. End of that moment. Next story arc. And it's like you don't get to really fully enjoy it. I guess you could say I was collecting it to be hopeful because a buddy of mine kept recommending it, and then I was getting it, and so that's why. And it's 59 books. It's the only reason I'm also not motivated to dispose of it. I would not recommend fairy tale to a Christian, and I wouldn't recommend fairy tale to any of my friends, and so, but I just don't feel led to throw it out. That's why I keep it. But going back to this, when you start to talk about the abstract things being as real as reality itself, that is a whole nother conversation, and I won't speak to it yet, but I just wanted to point that out.
Like Hamlet, and you think, well, is that... It's not true because it's fiction, but then you think, wait a minute, what kind of explanation is that? Like maybe it's more true than nonfiction, because it takes the story that needs to be told about you, and the story that needs to be told about you, and you, and you, and you, and abstracts that out and says, look, here's something that's a key part of the human experience as such, right? So it's an abstraction from this underlying noisy...
I remember what I was going to say. So, the complicated thing with this... All right, Rookie, have a blessed one, my man. See you next time. Hopefully, depending on what my schedule is Monday, I'll go live Sunday evening. But here's the risk with what he's saying right now. To associate fiction to a topic discussing the Bible. I want y'all to notice that. The dangerous thing that he's doing in this instance is talking about fiction and abstraction and associating that to the Bible itself. The Bible is not an extracting story. Majority of it is a recollection of history. Okay? That's one of the most crucial things. I know us as believers are sitting here like, of course we believe the Bible's real. True. But take it another step and recognize that it's an account of history. Are there symbolic events and metaphorical events that are being articulated in those same historical tract moments? Yes. But those stories that are incorporated in this real reality of history do not make the story imaginary or made up. Okay, so that's one of the things I wanted to make sure that we clarified on that, right? That's one of the huge differences.
Substrate, and people are affected by it because they see that the thing that's represented is part of the pattern of their being. That's the right way to think about it. And then with these old stories, these ancient stories, it seems to me like that process has been occurring for thousands of years. It's like we watched ourselves and we extracted out some stories. We imitated each other and we represented that in drama, and then we distilled the drama and we got a representation of the distillation, and then we did it again. And at the end of that process, it took God only knows how long. I think some of these stories, they've traced fairy tales back 10,000 years, some fairy tales, in relatively unchanged form. And it certainly seems to me that the archaeological evidence, for example, suggests that the really old stories that the Bible begins with are at least that old and likely embedded in a prehistory that's far older than that. And you might think, well, how can you be so sure? And the answer to that in part is that cultures that don't change, like the ancient cultures, right? They didn't change as fast as us. They stay the same. That's the answer. So they keep their information moving generation to generation. That's how they stay the same. And so we know, again, in the archaeological record, there are records of rituals that have remained relatively unbroken for up to 20,000 years. It was discovered in caves in Japan that were set up for a particular kind of bear worship that was also characteristic of Western Europe. So these things can last for very long periods of time. We're watching each other act in the world. And then the question is, well, how long have we been watching each other? And the answer to that, in some sense, is, well, as long as there's been creatures with nervous systems. And that's a long time. You know, that's some hundreds of millions of years, perhaps longer than that. We've been watching each other, trying to figure out what we're up to across that entire span of time. And some of that knowledge is built right into our bodies, which is why we can dance with each other, for example, right? Because understanding isn't just something that you have as an abstraction. It's something that you act out. You know? That's what children are doing when they're learning to rough and tumble play, is they're learning to integrate their body with the body of someone else in a harmonious way, learning to cooperate and compete, and that's all instantiated right into their body. It's not abstract knowledge. They don't know that they're doing that. They're just doing it. And so we can even use our body as a representational platform. So we've been studying each other for a long time, abstracting out what is it that we're up to, and that's what is it we're up to? What should we be up to? That's even a more fundamental question. If you're going to live in the world and you're going to do it properly, what does properly mean, and how is it that you might go about that? Well, it's the right question, right? It's what everyone wants to know. How do you live in the world? Not what is the world made of. It's not the same question. How do you live in the world? It's the eternal question of human beings. And I guess we're the only species that has ever really asked that question, because all the...
How do you move in the world? How do you move in the world? This is what this brought me to. We are stopping at 42 minutes in this 2-hour video. We're going to stop here at the 42-minute mark. We will continue this either Sunday or next week. Definitely we'll be continuing this, and we'll do a lot more of the video, that's for sure. But here's what I want to point out with that, right? He's giving this analogy about how, and I pray that y'all are catching it. What's up, Mar Patrice? Good to see you. I don't know. I'm sorry you missed most of it, but you can go to YouTube and you can watch what we've been doing, because we're live on YouTube as well, so you can watch the rest of this on YouTube, Mar Patrick. But notice something. He started out by speaking about how a lot of these rituals and ceremonial practices stem from us observing one another and watching one another. And that's where you get story writers, painters, sculptors, etc., who come up with these narratives and these fictions and these mythologies based off of how they have perceived humanity to interact with itself, right? So then he takes that a step further and he says, because this observation of each other is so ancient, that's also where we get the I'm doing good, Josiah, I'm doing real good. That's also how we get these illustrations of dance and things of that nature. Now, two things came to mind in regards to that I want to speak to with these last couple of minutes. One of those things that came to mind is the simpler one, is that of this is a good one. Happy I was here for it. Absolutely, Wendy. Absolutely. But the two things, and this is more for mature people, but I'm gonna say it in a mature way. Okay. This is in regards to SMEX. The thing about SMEX, right? SMEX is the unification of two people becoming one from the biblical spiritual corpus, which we do believe to actually be a real thing of what's happening. The other thing about the actual experience of intercourse is that is putting the two people in a position to actually know each other's bodies. I know that sounds very strange for me to be saying, especially being that I'm a Christian-focused platform. But I'm saying something that's real, that when you're having intercourse, you and that person are learning each other's bodies, what you like and what you don't like, how to move in a way that is complementary to the person that you are becoming one with. And so that gets into a lot of what he's saying here. That type of intimacy is day one ancient. Day one ancient. The only way humanity has lived is from humanity comprehending intimacy and intercourse and doing that right? I know a lot of people like to harp on the past just being about men dominating women, but you're really missing the point, because men and women functioned as units and as teams, which is why we've had so many great and vast and large nations. It wasn't just because of dominating and abusive men ruling. That's why those things came to be. Okay, the other thing too with that is that of wrestling. Now, one thing that people may not commonly know, and this mainly because I learned this from Ben Shapiro. I actually haven't looked up the Hebrew word to understand that it means that, right? But the meaning of the word helpmate, right, holds another translation in its Hebrew context to that of someone to wrestle with or contend with. Now, you might be thinking, wait, when God says he made Eve to be a helpmate to Adam, he wasn't trying to make someone to fight him all the time. No, but she is someone to challenge him in a healthy manner, or to contend with some of his own decision making in a healthy manner. That's the value of current marriages as well today. Your marriage isn't always going to be about the cupcake phase, though a lot of people want to convince people that that's what it is because of fear of fighting, fear of divorce, fear of physical, verbal violence and abuse, people being taken advantage of, people revealing their real nature later on. There's all these reasons to be afraid of marriage, but you contending with your partner is a key component of what it means to be married. And so the other thing too is, when you even think about the value of that wrestling match, take that even to Jacob contending with the angel. He had wrestled with the angel, his hip was out of place, the whole nine. The purpose of that is to understand one's strengths and weaknesses. And the value of that wrestling is that you are showing each other your strengths and your weaknesses, which actually allows for you to function more fully together. But that's one of the things that makes certain teams so very strong. Teams wrestle with one another. Teams practice out these plays on one another. You don't say, hey, I don't want to do these moves on our teammates. We're going to do it on some rando team to train. No. Football teams, basketball teams, other sports teams, wrestling teams, they train these gifts and abilities against each other, giving them the opportunity to learn each other's strengths, learn each other's weaknesses, correct for the problem areas, so that when you actually go to fight against a real problem, you actually come out the winner. You contending with your spouse, you contending for your faith with God, brings you out on top so that when you go to actually face reality, you are actually more of in your dominant form rather than having all of those openings. I pray that made sense, guys. But I think that's the beautiful thing about what he's saying is that we have been acting out a lot of things now today that we think is just commonplace. That's actually a reflection of what God had originally established since the beginning of time. Thank you, Wendy, for real. You said what God intended and what the flesh does is totally different. That is 110%. Now, some people here's another thing too. A lot of people assume that what you instinctively or naturally do is what God intended. But they miss that point. What you do instinctively and naturally may fall more in line with carnality and flesh rather than the spirit and the will of God. And you have to be able to identify the difference. That wrestling forces you to have to identify carnality, identify the flesh, so that you can overcome it. You don't know how to deal with your flesh if you are not faced with your flesh. Your Christian walk is not about you never seeing your flesh again. Your spiritual walk is about you becoming a person that's able to contend against your flesh. I don't think we talk about that enough. And this may be a disagreement even me and my dad might have, but our walk with God is not about us, just never again experiencing sin, never again experiencing temptation, never again, meeting someone that'll make us mad, never again encountering someone that'll hurt us, never again having certain experiences, never again being poor, never again being broke, never again crying in the corner of my room. No, you're going to have these experiences. Now, I don't mean that from, you're human, you're going to make mistakes. I don't mean that from that perspective. What I do mean is that you are going to be faced with that, and because you're going to be faced with life, you are able to tango with life. You are able to wrestle with life. On certain areas, you're able to be intimate with that aspect of life. And you will come out on top because of that. That's how he pruned you. That's right, Wendy. That's how he prunes you. That's how he prunes you. Mara Patry says two things. She said, you're referencing the story of the men who wrestle with an angel is right. Amen. Thank you for that. In our walk with God, my pastor says, it is like a race till you reach your goal. Amen. Amen. Some of us need to learn how to run out of breath. But the only way you can build your endurance for the race is to run. There's no building endurance without the running. Amen. Amen. Thank you guys so very much for tonight. This has been absolutely amazing. I actually got to go so I can get us dinner and then get my kid and then get us on home because we got a lot to do tomorrow. Agapio says facts. The Christian life is about overcoming by surrendering to God. Praise the Lord. Thank you guys so very much. I love each and every one of you. I'll be making TikToks and YouTube videos over the next week. Those of you on my Discord, I need you to go to my server called YouTube Updates. There I have posted for 3 video topics that I want to work on, but I want your opinion on which video I should do first. So go check out YouTube Updates. Let me know on the Discord what you guys think. I'll do a TikTok to it as well. That way you guys can let me know your opinions. And I love each and every one of you. And I'll be updating you on the Discord, on the Patreon, and on TikTok for when we will be going live again. I love y'all, and y'all have a blessed evening. Peace.